It's a real privilege to be here again this morning, and it's really good to see you all. Last time I was up here on stage was the 23rd of April 2022, when I was saying some pretty significant vows to Julia. Probably not going to go as deep as that today, but as I said, it's a real privilege to be back here today, and if we haven't caught up with you yet, we're looking forward to catch up with you after the service. Before we move into our passage of Revelation 13 today, I'd like to tell you a quick story. Many of you would know the literary figure Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes was a leading detective, and his sidekick or his assistant was Watson. Watson was never quite as good as Sherlock Holmes. And one day Sherlock and Watson were on a camping trip, and they had a long dinner, they shared a bottle of wine together, and they went to bed. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, Sherlock woke Watson and said, "Watson, what do you see?" Watson woke up and said, "Sherlock, I see millions and millions of stars." And Holmes said to him, Sherlock said to him, "Watson, what does that tell you?" Watson replied, "Holmes, astronomically, that tells me that there are millions and millions of galaxies and potentially billions of planets. Astrologically, I observe that Saturn is in Leo. Horologically, I deduce that the time is around 3:15. Theologically, I can see that God is all-powerful and we are small and insignificant. Meteorologically, I suspect we're going to have a beautiful day. Why, Sherlock? What does that tell you?" Sherlock replied, "Watson, you idiot, someone has stolen our tent." And today, as we go through the passage of Revelation 13, we want to adopt the perspective of Sherlock Holmes. We want to adopt an overall perspective that looks at the concept of life as we go through the chapter of Revelation 13. Life together in the face of an unholy Trinity. The posture of life together in the face of an unholy Trinity. And the security of life together in the face of an unholy Trinity. Revelation 13 can be divided into two parts. The first part of Revelation 13 concerns a beast that rises out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads. From Revelation 13:1, "And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's. Its mouth were like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and authority and great authority." Going down to verse 5. "And to the beast was given a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words. And it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven, and was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain." That's the first part of Revelation 13. The second part of Revelation 13 concerns a second beast that arises out of the earth. This second beast has 2 horns and speaks like a dragon. Verse 11 of our chapter. "Then I saw another beast arising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose mortal wound was healed." Going down to verse 16, "And it causes all, small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or on the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark of the beast. Unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who is understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. The first beast and the second beast are interlinked. The second beast the lamb with two horns, speaking like a dragon, causes the rest of the world to worship the first beast that arises out of the sea. This first beast is like a leopard, has feet like a bear, and has mouth like a lion's mouth. And to get an understanding of this first beast in Revelation 13, we use a parallel passage in Daniel 7 to get some insight as to what this first beast means. In Daniel 7, Daniel has a dream. And in his dream, he sees four beasts, again, arise out of the sea. Daniel 7 says, "And four great beasts come out of the sea, different from one another. The first three beasts, which are on the left, the lion with the eagle's wings, a bear with three ribs in its mouth, and a leopard with four wings." And that might sound somewhat familiar, and it is, because this ties back and links into Revelation 13:1. Our beast which arises out of the sea has characteristics of a bear, a leopard, and a lion, which are the first three beasts that arise out of Daniel 7. And then the fourth beast in Daniel 7 arises out of the sea, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It was different from the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. It had iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. This fourth beast is terrifying and dreadful. And this fourth beast of Daniel 7 is the first beast of Revelation 13. And each beast, the first three beasts in Daniel 7, represent a kingdom which has arisen from the earth. Verse 17 of Daniel 7 says, the great beasts, are four kings which shall arise out of the earth. It's said that the first three beasts represent kingdoms which have passed. The kingdom of the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, and lastly the Greek Empire. But the fourth beast is something different. The fourth kingdom is something which is to come. The fourth beast is something which has aspects of kingdoms which have been, but this fourth beast is something far greater than the kingdoms that have come. This beast, this kingdom that is coming, has a global reach, and it will seek to crush. Verse 4 of Revelation 13 says, "Authority was given to it over every tribe and people." Daniel 7 says, "This kingdom is different to previous kingdoms. It shall wear out the saints, and it shall change the times and the law." The beast, a combination of what has come with greater power, shall seek to trample the earth, blaspheme against God, and make war on the saints. The sea in this passage, the first beast in Revelation 13, the fourth beast arises out of the sea, represents the nations of men. And there is coming a kingdom arising from the earth, which in Daniel 7, and curiously at the end of Daniel 7, says causes Daniel to change colour. And it's an interesting little note at the back end of that chapter. Daniel, a tanned Middle Eastern man, went a few shades lighter. And you get the sense from Daniel 7 and looking at the first beast that Daniel knew how to deal with these first three beasts. Daniel had held high office in the Babylonian Empire. The Medo-Persian Empire then came and took over the Babylonian Empire, and Daniel went and held high office in that empire as well. He had worked in pagan regimes. He had worked in pagan administrations. He had worked in extremely difficult situations and been put in extremely difficult situations, and he knew that God would rescue him, or God would rescue his friends, as he had continually seen during his time holding high office in those empires. But there was something very different about this first beast. There was something that frightened Daniel. Daniel, a leading intellectual of that time. And what frightened Daniel was that this time God may not rescue those saints. In fact, God may let his saints get crushed by the power of this first beast. This first beast in Revelation 13 achieves his power through a second beast. A second beast can be the second beast the lamb with two horns, speaking like a dragon, can be thought of like as a prophet, an influencer, who causes the world through miracles that the second beast wrought to worship the first beast. And the second beast achieves this power through the mark of the beast, a form of economic isolation and a form of economic manipulation whereby those who don't have the mark of the beast are completely isolated, and therefore to be able to retain, to survive in this world, people will get the mark, the passage says on the forehead or the right hand, and that's figurative, we'll come back to that in a minute. But the second beast uses a mark to achieve an economic form of coercion so that people worship this first beast. We've seen so far a combination of a first beast, a second beast, and then a mark of the beast. And the combination of the first beast, second beast, and mark of the beast can be seen of as a form of an unholy trinity that is coming on the world. There is coming on this world an unholy trinity that will have a global reach and will have the intent of world domination with the view of crushing God's people. Two beasts and one mark, an unholy trinity. However, in Revelation 13, there is an undercurrent of hope. There's an undercurrent of steely hope that runs through Revelation 13. As we said at the start, the goal of today's message is to view the concept of life from Revelation 13. And at the moment, there's not a lot of life going on. It's pretty grim. But there's a wonderful word in verse 5. Verse 5, if you see in Revelation 13, has the word allowed. The first beast was allowed to exercise power for 42 months. Over the last couple of weeks, we've heard the concept of 42 months a bit. The concept that the power of the dragon, of this period of time, is limited to a defined period of time. And the reign of this first beast, we can take encouragement from, is allowed by God. There's a concept of here that the reign of the first beast is sitting under the sovereign control of God. God is still ruling, even though there's an unholy trinity running riot through the world. And the reign of this first beast is for a limited time. So the reign of the first beast is allowed by God, and it's for a limited time, a period of 42 months. And all will worship this beast. All are going to worship this beast except those whose names are not written in the book of life. And the passage in Revelation 13 puts this thought in the negative. All are going to worship the first beast except those in the book of life. But you can switch this thought around. Those whose names are written in the book of life will not worship the first beast. Daniel 7 in his passage talks about the books in heaven are opened. And one of these books is the book of life. And you could devote a whole sermon to the concept of the book of life. The book of life is a book where all those who've committed their lives to Jesus, their names are indelibly or permanently etched into that book of life and cannot be removed. And they've been in that book of life since before the foundation of the world. And that is you today, and that is me today. If you have put your trust in Jesus, you can be assured that your name is today sitting in the halls of power in heaven in that book of life. And so that with all that is coming on the earth, the first beast, second beast, mark of the beast, Trinity, unholy Trinity, we can approach this unholy Trinity with absolute confidence because there is an unchangeable reality that exists today that your name, if you've trusted in Jesus, is etched into the book of life, and that's a present reality in heaven as we speak. And so because there's a reality of an absolute eternal security for you today, There are two calls to us from this passage. There's a call for patient endurance, verse 10. A call for patient endurance of the faith of the saints. A call in there to hang in there and endure. A call to hang in there and endure. Why? Why? Because things are going to get pretty tough. Why is it worth battening down the hatches and hanging in there? Why? Because your name is written in the book of life and cannot be removed. Verse 18 is a call for wisdom. Verse 18 says, here is a call for wisdom. And there's a call for wisdom to engage with this unholy Trinity, because our position is absolutely secure in heaven. Your name is written in that book of life, and therefore it's worth being wise. It's worth thinking through and engaging with this system that is coming on the world, because your position cannot be impacted by the effect of this first beast, second beast, mark of the beast, Trinity. It's worth engaging because you cannot be affected if you are in Jesus today. Our passage has a call for patience, a call for wisdom in light of the coming unholy alliance or unholy Trinity. The idea of an interconnection between a crushing state system and a leader is not new to this world. Last week we spent some time thinking about the D-Day Normandy invasion. And in November of this year, a film is coming out on the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a young pastor in Germany. He was about 32 years of age, and he was in Germany between the period of 1930 and 1940. In Germany at that time, there was intense pressure for the church to bend to the regime of the Nazi Party. In Germany at that time, there were 18,000 pastors. 3,000 pastors were solely committed to the regime. 3,000 pastors were solely committed against the regime. And there was a group of 12,000 in the middle that were trying to survive. And a gentleman at that time, on behalf of the Protestant church, tried to engage with the Nazi regime. His name was Niemöller, and he's in the top left there. And Niemöller desperately tried to negotiate on behalf of the Protestant church. In one negotiation with Hitler, he said, as part of a desperate plea to Hitler, we are all passionate about the Third Reich. And that was in a desperate attempt to try and placate the maniac that Hitler was in these meetings. And Hitler replied to Niemöller, I'm the one who created the Third Reich. You just worry about your sermons. And then in a few months' time, Hitler declared to Germany, in this hour I became responsible for the fate of the German people, and thereby I became the supreme judge of the German people. A real blatant challenge to the authority of the church at that time. And the Nazi propaganda war machine declared at that time that the appearance of Jesus ultimately represents a burst of Nordic light in the midst of a world tormented by symptoms of degeneracy. Nordic race was considered the apex of the racial hierarchy that the German Nazi regime was seeking to implement in the world. And that was the time in which the church was struggling to engage with this regime. And in this time, Bonhoeffer led a movement of the church that sought to stand for right despite the consequences that were coming. However, because of his stance, Bonhoeffer was shut down. And Bonhoeffer created a seminary to try and help pastors work through these very difficult issues, and that whole seminary was completely shut down. And as an horrific darkness fell on the German church, Bonhoeffer, as he packed up his seminary, wrote a book, a short book to the German church entitled Life Together. And it's a wonderful little book. Part of the benefits of getting married is you inherit your wife's library, and I found this book when I was going through Julia's books. And it's an absolutely fascinating book. And it's a fascinating book because everything was chaotic. Everything was crumbling around Bonhoeffer's church. To give you an indication of the context in which he wrote this book, on the 29th of June 1934, it's called The Light of the Long Knives, when the Nazi Party went through Germany and arbitrarily broke into people's houses and hacked innocent people to death. There were unspeakable atrocities that were committed to elderly people and disabled children. It was a time when Jewish people were pulled over on the streets and openly mocked and embarrassed. And as everything was shut down, Bonhoeffer wrote to his church and said, "How are you doing life together?" And it's just fascinating that his central message to the church at this time was, how is your life together? Bonhoeffer said that Christians simply cannot take for granted the privilege of living among other Christians. It is only by gracious anticipation of last things that Christians are privileged to live in visible fellowship with other Christians. The physical presence of other Christians is a source of incomparable joy and strength to the believer. The physical presence of other Christians is a source of incomparable joy and strength to the believer. Bonhoeffer's message to the church was, in the face of everything that is going on and in the face of everything that is to come, how is your life together? How is your life together as a local community? And we can view the picture of the Nazi regime with Hitler, with the allegiances that people were required to show to the Nazi regime, as a symbol of the first beast, second beast, mark of the beast, Trinity. It's a kind of mini microcosm of what the unholy Trinity will be. So the question for Mount Gambier Baptist and the question for us is, how is our life together in the face of an unholy Trinity, which is the signs are emerging, one day will come? How is our life together? And Bonhoeffer gave his church 7 ministries. He said to his church in his book, here are 7 ministries that your church, our church, needs to engage and build our lives around to ensure that our life together is tight in the face of this Nazi regime. And in considering Revelation 13 and in considering how we as a body approach a first beast, second beast, mark of the beast, Trinity, these ministries offer a very useful framework for us to consider how we build our community and how we frame our community so that we are tight together, so that we can withstand external pressures that one day will come to bear. They may be soon, they may be later, but one day those pressures will come. The ministry of authority. The ministry of authority is the ministry of understanding that the church is the most egalitarian or equal place in our community. Jesus said to the scribes and Pharisees, "You have one teacher and you are all brothers. The greatest among you will be your servant." In the teeth and in the face of an unholy Trinity, in here, greatness flips. In the face of an unholy Trinity, in the face of a coming reality, in here, the highest place of authority is found in the greatest place of service. The ministry of authority. The ministry of meekness. A ministry of mighty people who are completely under control. A ministry of those who are spiritually secure, kind-hearted, self-controlled, mighty believers who think little of themselves. The ministry of authority. The ministry of meekness, the ministry of bearing. Let me backtrack. The ministry of helpfulness, a ministry of radical helpfulness in our community. Bonhoeffer, in his discussion on the ministry of helpfulness, talked about God's crooked straight path. We like to have a straight path. And what he explored through this was that in the ministry of helpfulness comes alive at the moments of greatest inconvenience to ourselves. Our deviations are God's interventions into our lives. And so as a community, embrace those inconvenient interventions, because it is at that point that our ministry of helpfulness really gets going. The ministry of bearing. The ministry of suffering and enduring together as a body, as a community. Endure and stand shoulder to shoulder together, tight together. Bonhoeffer says you are only really a brother when someone is a real burden to you. The ministry of listening. The ministry of a kind listening ear to all. If we refuse to really engage with our brother, to really listen to each other, then we are no longer capable of the greatest act of service we can be to someone in our community. People today, especially today, need a listening ear. The ministry of holding one's tongue. In our Christian community, we can achieve so much by just simply not saying it. This ministry involves the abandoning of critique of each other, and thereby we foster an environment where each person is completely free to become the unique person that God has called them to be within our community here. And then, as people have that freedom, we watch the effect of that flow into the development of our community. And finally, the ministry of proclaiming. As part of our united body, we are called not to stay in this cloistered environment, but rather together to go out into the state system and engage with the state and call those who are living under the mark of the beast from a reign from under the mark of the beast to a reign where their names will be written and etched into the book of life. The ministry of proclaiming. The ministry of authority, the ministry of meekness, the ministry of helpfulness, the ministry of listening, the ministry of holding one's tongue, the ministry of proclaiming takes a whole new picture when you think of these ministries, when you think of how it would have been doing life under the reign of the swastika or the reign of the Nazi regime. And we are moving into an era in Australia today when we in the church really need each other. How is our life together in Mount Gambier Baptist Church? How is our shoulder to shoulder together in our church today? And I'd like you to take a quote from a book called The Benedict Option. And if you get nothing from today's message, I pray that this quote would transform your week, because it really does. We as faithful Orthodox Christians didn't ask for internal exile from a country we thought was our own, but that's where we find ourselves. We are a minority now, so let's be a creative one, offering warm, living, light-filled alternatives to a world that is growing cold, dead and dark. And we are really now a minority now. That's a reality. So let's, as a minority, and as an expression of that minority today in this city, let's be a creative one, offering warm, light-filled alternatives to a world that is growing cold, dead and dark. In the face of the unholy trinity of Revelation 13, how is our life together in our community? We've seen how there's a call for a tight life together in the face of an unholy trinity. But then Revelation 13 is also a call for wisdom as we engage with the world, and especially as we engage with the state. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who understands calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number is 666. The mark of the beast is a controversial topic, and in preparing this, I had to stop looking at the internet because of the rubbish that's out there on this topic. The mark of the beast represents an allegiance to a system that is not of God. The mark of the beast is an allegiance and alliance to a system that is anti-God. The mark of the beast has a number, and the number of man is 6. And this number is close to God's number. The number of God in the Bible is thought to be 7. And so there's a close proximity between man's number and God's number. And so that you can get the idea that the mark of the beast is something that is not God, but it's trying to get close to God. The number of God is 7. And so you therefore could say that the number of the Trinity is 777. The number of man is 6, and therefore the number of the unholy Trinity is 666. And the engagement as a united body with this mark of the beast requires cutting-edge wisdom and discernment as we think through the ideas, topics and worldviews that we're exposed to from our system. Firstly, what the mark of the beast is not. The mark of the beast is not the credit card. The mark of the beast is not the iPhone. The mark of the beast is not Bill Gates. And believe it or not, the mark of the beast is not the COVID-19 vaccine. And a continued deep dive by the church into every new thing that this world produces as to whether or not this is the arrival of the mark of the beast is neither helpful or required. What is required is for us to learn how to engage with our outside world, the first beast, second beast, mark of the beast, Trinity, and how to engage with the tools of this world to discern the movements of the mark of the beast or to discern the movements of a system that is anti-God. Today we battle, in Ephesians 6, it says, we battle against spiritual forces of evil. Daniel 10:13 is a very interesting passage to just go and briefly look at. Daniel was desperately praying and an angel came to him and said, Daniel, I'm coming to help you, but I was withstood by the king of Persia. And the idea was that for Daniel's prayer to get answered, there had to be a spiritual battle that was won before the prayer could get answered. And that took some time. And so there is a reality that everything that we engage with in this world today is marked with the mark of the beast, or is marked with a system that is anti-God. And therefore, we're called to engage with this world, or we're called to engage with a system that is anti-God with a perspective of wisdom, to be able to acutely and accurately decipher where our current age is trying to shift us. Everything in this world is tainted. The smartphone, once upon a time people postured, is this the mark of the beast? It's a wonderful tool, but, for example, it's wreaked havoc amongst teenage girls. The credit card has produced very useful financial freedom. However, it's caused a plethora of debt across the Western world. Technology is making our lives easier, and that is having significant advances for the benefit of people. However, there are downsides of the development of technology, especially in the area of AI and so on. So how do we engage? We're called to engage with this world. We're called to use this world. We're called to get in there with this world's system. But we're called to, as we engage with the world, to discern what is of God and what is not of God. And what is the move through the new thing that the world gives us? What is that thing that is seeking to shift you from 777 to 666? In Nehemiah, they were building the wall. And as they built the wall, they came under attack. So they continued building the wall. One hand they had a trowel, and the other they had a sword. And so living in the face of an unholy trinity requires us to live with wisdom, to accurately discern what is a move of the world system and what is not a move of the world system. Engaging with this world with one hand on the plough and one hand on the sword, and as we heard from last week, the sword is the word of God. Life in the face of an unholy trinity requires us to have a posture of wisdom as we engage with this world. And then life in the face of an unholy Trinity is undergirded by the reality that we have a security in Jesus. There is a book of life, and if you've accepted Jesus as your Lord and Saviour, your name today in heaven is written in that book of life. And your name cannot be removed from that book of life. And this is a wonderful thought, because things could get grim in our world. Things could get grim in Australia today. It's my view, with seeing what's going on in this world, that amongst my age group and south, there could be some tough tests for us as Christians today. A form of a brutal world system is gradually taking over Australia today as we move away from a traditional Judeo-Christian world ethic that has to date provided some protection for us. And that future for us can be confronting and it can be uncertain. And the future in the light of Revelation 13 is incredibly uncertain. But in the face of what is to come in the short term and potentially in the long term, we can approach life with an absolute confidence, because your name is written in heaven. And in the eyes of heaven, eternity has already begun for you. And death, as the song says, is just the doorway into everlasting life. But today you may be here and you may not have a certainty. You may not have an eternal certainty about where you are positioned in heaven. And if you do not have a certainty of life today, then please do not leave today's message until you have spoken to someone about how to meet and trust Jesus. Talk to Cam, talk to Rodney, talk to someone, because today Jesus stands before you saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And those who come to me, I will never cast out. Jesus says, come unto me, all ye who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Jesus says, I will give you rest. That rest is a concept of eternal rest. That one day, once you have put your name in, once you have put your trust in Jesus, your future forever is secure and you will be at rest forever. And so today, if you do not have an eternal security in your life, then come today and trust Jesus as your Lord and Saviour and gain that eternal rest that is available for you today. And today, for those of us who know Jesus, let us be a creative church, offering warm, light-filled alternatives to a world that's growing cold, dead and dark. We've heard today a lot about horns. Horns on the first beast, there were 10 of them. Horns on the second beast, there were 2 of them. But there's a wonderful promise for us in Psalm 75. But as for me, I'll declare it and rejoice forever. I will sing praises to the God of Jacob. All the horns of the wicked he will cut off, but the horns of the righteous will be lifted up. Life together in the face of an unholy Trinity, how tight are we in Mount Gambier Baptist Church? Living in the face of an unholy Trinity requires us to have a posture of real wisdom, cutting-edge wisdom. And life in the face of an unholy Trinity is grounded on the fact that we have an eternal security with Jesus, because your name is written in the book of life. And so today, as we look at Revelation 13, remember that you've read the book, you know the end of the story, and you are on the winning side. We are a minority now, so let's be a creative one, offering warm, living, light-filled alternatives to a world that is growing cold, dead, and dark. As we think about this, we'll just have a moment's pause and then we'll wrap up in prayer.